Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about our favorite topic to discuss, and hopefully yours as well, British politics. Because when you think about it, it affects more than just Great Britain. It actually, there's lessons we can all learn about politics in our own respective countries. And this is the Ayn Rand Center UK, after all. Let's talk about Boris Johnson. There's apparently a lot of controversy around whether or not he got renovations done in his flat, which I think we would just call a condo. We might call it a flat as well. And the question is this a one big distraction? Is this petty? Does this matter? And here to help me understand it is a guy who, well, he's not British himself, but he's basically like an information. Look at him. He's holding up books. He's read everything. He's read more books by 9 a.m. this morning than most of us will all year. Please welcome the human walking library, the guy who's going to help us understand British politics, Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
Thank you. The reason I raised the books is to clarify to people that we're not only going to talk about politics. What we want to do is to draw the parallels with philosophy and what are the lessons to be learned. So here's what is very interesting these days in the UK. So there is a storm around the Prime Minister. And you could say there should be a storm around the Prime Minister for many, many reasons and for many of his decisions that are very questionable, such as, for example, the way the country dealt with the pandemic, how he has imposed a green agenda that is going to basically keep the economy of the country prisoner for decades to come, and other things like that. But apparently these are not the issues that are at the top of the agenda. What is at the top of the agenda is what I could only describe as a high school drama, and a high school drama which is one of the boring ones. So here is the overview of what has happened. So the Prime Minister had a friend, a guy called Dominic Cummings, who was the mastermind behind Brexit, a very interesting guy, an outsider, or he saw himself as an outsider of politics, and someone who, in the eyes of the left, is everything wrong with this government. But also the Prime Minister has, how to put it? So there is a Yoko Ono, apparently, situation, and which is that the wife, the wife of the Prime Minister supposedly has gone between him and Cummings. Now, how is this related to all that stuff? At some point in November, Cummings leaves the government. And again, according to rumors, he's ousted by Carrie Simons, who is the partner of Boris Johnson. And then he becomes bitter with that, and he starts taking out dirt on the government that he served for a long period for almost for a year. So what we have is a series allegedly of scandals that allegedly have been leaked by Cummings. And each one of these scandals is very interesting because it can give us an insight of what politics are about today. So I'm going to present them one by one, and then we can discuss them, and then we can see what are the conclusions we can draw. So alleged scandal number one, which for me is the most interesting one, and it's the Dyson ventilators deal. So I don't know if you know Dyson, how it's called, not Hoovers, you know what I'm talking about, the things that you use to clean the house.
Swiffer?
Yes. So, but the electronic one. Anyway, so that's what made Dyson quite famous. So, and Sir James Dyson has now a big company that also builds ventilators. But this company is now based in Singapore. So what Sir Dyson did, and he has the title of Sir, and again, he's a billionaire, and also he was in favor of Brexit. So you see how slowly we build up this idea of this bad businessman who not only is a bad person who takes his money and leaves, but also he's pro-Brexit. So actually what happened is that in March of 2020, Johnson was in need of, actually the country was in need of ventilators. And there was it was the time where we had the very, very bleak predictions in terms of how many we would need. So Johnson gets in a frantic attempt to get as many ventilators in the country as possible. And Dyson says, my team is building ventilators. We're not only building Hoovers or however this thing is called, and I can be of help. Here's the catch though. Dyson asks, I can send you my people from Singapore and they can build them in the UK, but could you tell me what's going to be the tax situation? And basically Johnson says, don't worry, I'll fix it. It's like a text message where he replies with sort of, I'll fix it. And Dyson says, okay. After some days, Dyson come back and said, look, I haven't got an answer. Is it okay if my people come there, or will they have to pay tax both in Singapore and the UK? Something like that. And Johnson says, look, I promise you, there is no problem. Now, almost a year after, these discussions are leaked, again, allegedly by Cummings, who left the government and is now bitter. And you would say, what is the problem? Actually, when I read the story, Johnson rose in my eyes. Now I have slightly higher esteem of him than I had before. Because again, he was doing a very urgent effort to make sure that as many ventilators as possible are built. Luckily, or anyway, we didn't need these ventilators. And turns out that Dyson lost 20 million in this endeavor, but he says, it's okay, it's my patriotic duty, whatever. Now, you would say, where is the scandal? The scandal is that such a big businessman actually managed to send direct text to the prime minister. So the Labour Party, which for people who are not in this country is the left-leaning party, called the revelations, quote, jaw-dropping. And the shadow business minister said that, frankly, it stinks that a billionaire businessman can text the prime minister and get an immediate response, and apparently an immediate change in policy. So there is a deep discussion whether there was actually a change in policy, but let me tell you, I couldn't care less. Within this context, I wish that Dyson could come here and basically do business with zero tax, as I wish would be the case with everyone. So I have no idea why this thing has elevated to the status of scandal. And whoever is shocked that a businessman can have a direct access to the prime minister, again, we could discuss the implications, but in a time of crisis, to me, it makes sense. Let me say one more story, which I really liked. So someone asked the CEO, I don't remember if it was of Moderna or of Pfizer, one of the two big vaccine companies. They said, how come Israel has all these vaccine doses? And the guy said, look, their prime minister was calling me 30 times every day. And at some point, he called me and got me out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to give them the vaccine doses. So, I wish more prime ministers would actually do that, because unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you see it, healthcare is in the hands of the government. So the fact that in a crisis situation, some corners were sidestepped, for me, it's not a big issue. We have 3 more scandals, but let's start with that.
One man's scandal is another man's feature of the system we live under, the mixed economy. I would like to live in a world where any text message between a businessman and the prime minister involving some sort of favor or some sort of private dealings is a scandal and an impeachable offense. But that's not the system that the people have voted for. That's not what they want. They want a government that picks winners and losers, but they think, I want the union. I want the laborers. I want the little guy, the Main Street, as we call them in America, not Wall Street, not big business. No, those guys can fend for themselves. We can just milk them dry. And for a while, that's basically how it was. I'm actually reading right now a recent, one of the, not the latest, but the second to latest issue of the Objective Standard, and there's a long essay about cronyism, and it sort of gives me the impression that up until the 1970s there wasn't nearly as much lobbying done by corporations as we see today. So like between the time that regulations and selective taxations were sort of brought into the economy, maybe sometime in the early or mid 20th century, basically corporations just kind of took it and dealt and just adjusted their behavior to it. And then in the 1970s, corporations took a much more hands-on approach where they started lobbying, basically bribing, but it's in self-defense to a large degree in the 1970s. And with time, it became more of an offensive strategy, not only defensive, but also trying to get a leg up on the other companies. And it's very difficult to judge, like, is this monstrous or is this adjusting yourself to the position that you were put in? So the politicians as well, they're actively going out and pressuring businessmen into a relationship with themselves. And it's very monstrous, but at the same time, to exist in politics today, you need a leg up. You need money. And the other politicians are in this incestuous relationship with businessmen. So I don't know if I'm addressing specifically what's going on in England, but again, we're as horrified as you are, England. We're as horrified as you are. But unlike most of you, now I sound patronizing, unlike some of you, or unlike some people, we have a solution, but you might not like it. We need to divorce the government from the economy, other than enforcing contracts and arresting fraudsters, right? Protection of rights, and that's it. Back to you, Nikos.
By the way, the term I was looking for, the voom, 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 was vacuum cleaner. So
yes, I feel stupider than you might feel. As soon as I look at the chat room, everyone's like, "You mean a vacuum cleaner?" You said vroom, 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 vroom. I'm like, what? Like an egg beater? Like what do you call that thing? I don't know.
Why would the egg beater do the vroom, vroom? Anyway.
But then hold on. But then I said a Swiffer, and you said yes, but an electric one. I'm like, no, that's a great idea. Someone should make an electric Swiffer cleaner. I would buy it. They see how stupid the consumers.
But I don't know what a Swiffer is.
It's the device you basically put a piece of paper on, like, that absorbs stuff from the ground, like dust and hair and stuff.
I think people got it. I think people
yes, but like, oh, what a genius idea. Make an electric Swiffer. What if Swiffer started selling an electric Swiffer? And people said, whoa, that's genius. I'll buy it. Where do I sign up? And like, nothing like that has ever been done before. I wonder if anyone ever thought of doing that before, right?
The Daily Objective, the show where you get invention ideas.
Or reinvention of the vacuum cleaner, calling it an electric Swiffer.
True. So where does Ayn Rand deal with the issue of lobbying? It's in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. It's essay number 16, The Pool Peddlers. And she says something very interesting there, and why focusing on every scandal of lobbying basically is not super fruitful. So she says, here's what happens. We are told that the government is taking decisions based on, quote, public interest. But at the same time, there is no objective rule on how a decision is taken by the government. And usually what happens is when the government takes a decision, someone wins and someone is losing. It's taking from someone and giving to someone else. So basically, what it says is that since there is no such entity as the public, for which the public interest should be served, and since the public is merely a number of different individuals, what happens is that people are lining up saying that we are the public, that you should do a favor to us because this is how you are going to help the public. So if so, says Rand, then all men and all private groups have to fight to the death for the privilege of being regarded as, quote, the public. And then she says, all public interest legislation comes down ultimately to the grant of an undefined, undefinable, non-objective, arbitrary power to some government officials. So first thing to hold, the way policy is made means that some government officials have sometimes a power of life and death, economic life and death, when it comes to businesses or when it comes to the market. So, and here's the key. The worst aspect of it is not that such a power can be used dishonestly, but that it cannot be used honestly. So there is no honest way to take from someone and give to someone else, or to be a central planner of the economy, or to use force in the economy. Continuing, the wisest man in the world with the purest integrity cannot find a criterion for the just, equitable, rational application of an unjust, inequitable, irrational principle. The best that an honest official can do is to accept no material bribe for his arbitrary decision. But this does not make his decision and its consequences more just or less calamitous. What does this mean to us? That when a government official is actually making decisions in the economy or anywhere else, and when our rights are violated, it does not matter whether it was done in the proper way or the improper way. And I find it quite annoying that many liberals, what they do, and some liberal think tanks, I don't want to name names, they say we have these metrics to judge how a government, whether legislation is passed on the right way or it's passed in a corrupt way. Whereas the simple question is anyone's rights here violated? And when it comes to this particular case with the ventilators, taking into accordance that the context that healthcare is run by the government, at that particular moment, at that particular crisis, I think the Prime Minister did what was reasonable to do, which is run after every possible resource and says, help me, I need to build ventilators.
Yeah. So read a couple super chats, shall we?
Yes,
Jeff with $2 Canadian. Thank you for that. Brian Bonar with $2 American. Thank you even more for that. That's real money. Mary Aline with $2 American. Just vacuum cleaners. Yeah. Jeff again with $10 Canadian. Now that, even though it's Canadian, really means a lot. Thank you. He goes, we bend the way the wind blows too often so as not to be broken. Business is no different. Yeah, it's true. I mean, look, some businessmen are much more dishonorable than others. They go the extra mile to partake in cronyism. But still, the solution is not to try and rearrange the deck chairs in the sinking Titanic, right? At the end of the day, we need to be for laissez-faire capitalism and understand that nothing less will suffice. Mary Aline with $5 American says, if politicians didn't have inappropriate power, businessmen would have no reason to buy them. Absolutely. Unless you really believe in a certain politician's platform, you'd have no reason to donate anything to them because they would have no ability to give you anything in return. Or in such a laissez-faire society, if they did you a favor, they are risking getting caught and getting thrown in prison. Whereas in today's context, they're doing their job by picking winners and losers. Bonnie with $2 American says, best show on YouTube, smiley face. No, Bonnie, you're the best. I was gonna say show on YouTube. You're the best super chatter on YouTube, if you ask me. The thing about cancel culture, see, we can speak the language that the people understand. The thing about cancel culture is basically everyone's guilty of something. Everyone's has a tweet. Everyone had, some type of thing they said or did in the past that did not age well. So basically everyone's guilty, and then we just can basically dig up something on anyone and they're in trouble now. And that's kind of what some of these scandals really sound like to me. It's like people within the certain system that they're in, they did something which at any time could just be called corruption and bribery, which yes, it is, but it's by design of the system that we all quote signed up for, even though I am looking to sign up for a way out of it. So everyone's guilty, like everyone at any time, and so at any time you can say any corporation is bribing politicians. Any politician you can just point to and say, oh, look, they took money that this corporation gave them. These are all true, but we are all guilty of it because that's just the world we're living in. And when it comes to this topic of cronyism, let's fix this. Let's separate state from economics. Is that asking too much?
And for people who say that the powerful part here is business, my question is this: if the powerful part is business, why do business have to go to the government and bribe? So, for example, actually, the person who asks the favor doesn't sound to me to be the most powerful part. Now, you have cases where, for example, the person who wants to do the bribing is also, let's say, the mafia boss, and there's a low-level politician. But when you talk about the big picture, it's what you say, business are actually playing defense with lobbying. And actually, I had 4 different quote scandals, and each one gives a different lesson. But turns out this was too ambitious. So I will mention the last thing. I will skip 2 of them. And I'll skip the Boris Johnson refurbishment. So basically, I'll skip this stuff, which is in a way hilarious. So basically, he fixed his house and he got a loan by someone, and he claims he returned this. And for some reason, this is a scandal because he fixed his house, which the house is in 10 Downing Street, by private money. And my question is, so would we rather he would have done it with public money, which is, so for me, the big scandal, for example, is the ridiculous expenses that MPs claim every year. So again, I care very little about this one. Now, and again, the context of why I care very little is because I recognize that within this system that the government has all this power to the economy, the problem is with the government. And actually, I remember whenever there was a scandal, I remember this from my Communist Party days. Usually the party line was, the problem is not the scandal, the problem is with the system. And in a way, they got this right for the wrong reason. So I would say, yes, the problem is with the system, but the system is not capitalist. The problem is that the government had so much power that people need to go to the government to ask basically for favors. So one of the other, quote, scandals, or maybe this is an actual scandal, is the Saudi crown prince texting the prime minister in the summer and saying, look, I'm trying to buy Newcastle football team, and there are all these hurdles. Can you do something? And again, people would say, oh, why does Boris Johnson have to do anything with the Saudi crown prince? But remember, last week, when Boris Johnson said, we're not going to allow the football super league, and we're going to impose limitations on the football teams to go to play to that competition, everyone was clapping. They say, yes. So basically, they want the prime minister to be involved in football, but when he's allegedly not in bed, but flirting with the Saudi prince, then suddenly it's not okay. And of course, there are many issues to be raised here, but please let's keep the standard and not judging the intervention of a prime minister on football based on the occasion. But let me also mention the last thing, which I also find this a very cheap shot. So there was also a lot of anger because the prime minister allegedly said that he would rather see bodies pile high and let COVID rip rather than impose another lockdown. And everyone said how inhuman, how bad this is, how horrible. This is a person who hasn't got any morals. Now, again, this is a line which is completely out of context. And as I said many times, I wouldn't want to be in Johnson's shoes. So imagine if you have to take the decision, do I impose a third lockdown or not? And you have 10 people talking from 10 sides. And at some point you said, well, no, it's not a solution. Yeah, there might be piles of bodies. I'm not imposing a third lockdown. Of course, spoiler alert, he did impose a third lockdown. But again, the fact that suddenly these are the big issues and people are raising the issue whether maybe he should even resign when these things start piling up. I don't think that any of these issues are worthy of a prime minister to resign. I think this is one of the really, really bad prime ministers, completely unprincipled. There is a case to be made, maybe this has been the worst government in recent British history. This is a discussion that we could have. But the fact that there's this line which is out of context, the fact that Dyson texted him so that we could have more ventilators, the fact that we found out that the government is that big business or foreign leaders or despots or however you want to call them have access to the prime minister. If you're shocked by that, again, start questioning what should be the role of the government, the size of the government, and the power of the government.
Yeah, like I made the analogy to cancel culture. You know, everyone's guilty. Then just anytime someone has it out for you, they can just grab something you've done. I mean, similarly with government, by design, we have a government who makes no differentiation between the Saudi prince and a benevolent, democratically elected prime minister, such as the one in Western Europe. So at any time, you could just suddenly say, did you see the president holding hands with the Saudi prince? And the media can make a big deal out of it. I mean, the kids in cages on the border by ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency. I mean, these are all actual moral outrages in many cases, but But every president is guilty of the same thing. Every government in recent memory has been doing most of these things. So it's very selective, and that's and like that's kind of one example of my analogy to cancel culture. Another one is every business is guilty of antitrust, quote unquote, because antitrust means nothing. It's arbitrary. Upon starting a business, you are guilty of something by the laws that we have on the books. It should not be that way, but that's how it is. So by starting a business, by running a business, you are guilty of something, and you would better have good relations with your local government, your state government, your federal government. Those are the American things. I'm sure there's equivalents in England. You better have good relations with them, because it ultimately boils down to relationships. Sadly, again, everyone's guilty of something. So when it comes to big business, they're all guilty of antitrust. I mean, because antitrust just means a politician just needs to say, yeah, this right here is unfair. It's unfair to the other businesses that are struggling. It's unfair to them. Or in some way you cheated. It's a monopoly, or it's unfair competition in some way, right? It's these two conflicting things are somehow both or one of them true at the whim of a politician. And I think you mentioned people say like, oh, the lobby system benefits businesses. Do you know how much more difficult it is to run a business in this topsy-turvy society we've crafted? I just imagine how much easier it would be to run a business without having to deal with all of this stuff. You need to now have an entire department of your company dedicated to schmoozing and dealing with politicians, to fund this guy, don't fund that guy, bribe this guy, don't bribe that guy. It's absolutely ridiculous that politics are now a part of running a business in the modern world. It should not be this way. But again, this is what we get in a mixed economy. And so, no, it does not benefit companies to have this system. They would all be much, much better off in a world where that was not the case. And one of the things I read in the aforementioned Objective Standard article on cronyism is that there's a good chance that Windows, Bill Gates's Windows, would have had a smartphone that was more popular than the Android. The article makes the case that Bill Gates and Windows were too busy dealing with antitrust prosecution and all types of BS, that they didn't really have the time and energy to develop their own version of the smartphone that could have very well done better than the Android and sooner. So it's not, the lobby system benefits nobody.
And why did we call the episode The Emptiness of Politics or something like that? Because notice how more and more the two big parties in the UK, the Conservatives and Labour, agree on all the basics. They agree about our national healthcare system, which is supposedly the envy of the world. They agree on the green agenda. They just disagree maybe should we implement it within 5 or within 10 years. They agree on every big major thing that has to do with politics. Because remember, politics is what should be the role of the government in society. And they agree on all that stuff. And in order now to justify their position as fiercely opposed to each other, they have to find the smaller and smaller and smaller issues. And I've said in the past, this is what explains the culture wars. When you see the field of politics being diverted to issues, to smaller and smaller issues, or to issues such as, oh, you did this scandal, or the discussion is who is taking the decision? Is it the prime minister's partner, or is this his friend? So again, this stuff, this is gossip. This is not the essence of politics. And why did I mention the Ayn Rand letter? So I was reading by the way, this is one of the most less known works of Rand, but it has some very good articles there. So I was looking her work on the Watergate scandal because I wanted to see how she approached scandal. And she says something very interesting. She says, basically, we make a mistake. And the mistake is that we think that politicians are, let's say, they want power. They're hungry for power. But even being hungry for power because you have this big scheme requires some skills, the skills to plot or to have a plan to begin with. And what she says is, quote, their particular goal is not power for power's sake. This requires an ideology, even though an evil one, but what their goal is, power without purpose. Their ambition is not to change, enslave, or rule the country. This requires large-scale calculations, but merely to sit in a big office, rule a staff of secretaries, and grant or deny favors to the biggest industrialists who come begging hat in hand. So this is exactly what we're seeing here. This is the battle of ideas that we see here in the UK, but also in the West. Big parties that have almost invisible differences, and it's all about who's going to take power for power's sake, not even in terms of having a particular plan to impose.
Yeah, should we call it a wrap and jump over to YouTube? Or to Clubhouse rather. It is about that time. Thank you everyone for the super chats. I wonder if I stunted the super chats by saying Bonnie was my favorite, and then maybe everyone gave me the cold shoulder and said, "Oh well, if she's your favorite, then no more super chats for me." You'll never know. We'll never know. But thank you for all the great super chats today. It was a great day. Thank you everybody. Coming up at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. Eastern. On this channel, Don Watkins and James Valiant will discuss Ayn Rand's essay, Art and Sense of Life. That's a heavy one. It's good stuff, though. Indispensable. Please join us for that. And then coming up at 9 p.m. UK time on Clubhouse, the hot new show, Flirting with Reason, with Nikos and Maria. I cannot say Maria without the accent. Ever I go, Nikos, it's like Nikos compels it. The topic today is femcells. You've heard of incels? Those guys weird you out. Wait till you hear about the femcells. I'm looking forward to learning. Come by to Clubhouse, listen, and also you may participate. Offer your experience, as Nikos says, or your lack of experience. I'll add to that. Maybe you have some questions for a real life man or woman.
No, it's not exactly the same. It's not femcells. It's not that they cannot find a romantic partner. It's a bit more meta than that. But join us in 2.5 hours on Clubhouse to discuss this, and join us now to discuss lobbying, Boris Johnson, and the teenage high school drama that is British politics nowadays. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much to the super chatters. Thanks, Rucka. Thanks, Lord behind the scenes. Bye, everyone.
See you on Clubhouse. Goodbye.
See you on Clubhouse. Bye-bye.